I'm Zina Tenenbaum, and I'm here with Carol Kayfetz. Carol has gone through a lot of adversity in her life. She is one of our Living Library participants, and she's here to talk about it and tell us about it and tell us how she overcame some very serious adversity. Carol, can you please share your story as you remember it?
I'm not supposed to be here. I was 48 years old in 1995. I was a super mom, had a normal life, happy marriage, great husband, fantastic kids, looked after my husband's law practice, looked after our 4 children, and ran the household. On January the 10th, 1995, at approximately 8:45 in the morning, I could not catch my breath. I was reaching for air. The pain in my chest was unbearable, excruciating. Danny called 911 as I was gasping for air. The ambulance team arrived shortly thereafter and treated me as if I were having a heart attack. They gave me nitroglycerin under my tongue, oxygen, and whisked me away to Mount Sinai Hospital. I wanted to go home. The doctors wanted me to go home as well. Women were not considered worthy of heart attack investigation. My cardiologist looked at all my symptoms, my genes, and decided to order an angiogram. That was not easy. The hospital refused. She would not give up. I was continued to bed on a heart monitor. I could not walk without assistance. I actually thought this was ridiculous and wanted to go home. After 10 days, my doctor told me that my condition was going to get me the angiogram test. Hard to believe one had to fight for treatment in Canada for women. As I thought of the angiogram, I was scared, but I never showed my fear. I merely kept smiling and kept my spirits up. I wouldn't let this get to me. I say to myself, just keep smiling. I was so nervous, I recall being wheeled in my hospital bed from Mount Sinai Hospital through a very long underground tunnel leading to Toronto General Hospital for the test. They discovered a 95% blockage of the main artery that supplied blood to my main muscle of my heart called anterior descending artery. I never had a heart attack, no heart damage, only symptoms, which were what brought me to the hospital that morning. Doctors said I could not live without a bypass or clearing the blockage. I was a candidate for emergency surgery. My cardiologist said if I did not have the surgery, I'd be dead in 2 months. No, not me. I had too much to live for. I want the surgery. The medical team met and said I required a heart bypass operation. Yes, I was terrified, frightened, but I was determined to do the surgery and get right back into living my life. Here was the plan. I would be in the hospital for a week, go on a 2-week healing vacation, and get on with my life. My heart surgeon said it was a routine procedure. They had never done a bypass on a person who was healthy. It was explained to me that this was the gift surgery of the year. Excuse me. They promised me a new lease on life, like a renewal by refurbishing my heart. I had enormous confidence. My husband was a complete wreck. However, I built confidence in him, so the day of the surgery he was really well prepared. Unending flow of visitors came to wish me well. The surgery was in the early morning of Friday, January 20th, 1995. The vascular surgeon came out and said everything went slick and went off to a lecture somewhere in the States. They told my husband to go out for breakfast. When he came back, all he saw was chaos. My heart had stopped beating. What happened? What went wrong? All he knew was they were trying to save my life. Another heart surgeon was found on the spot. They opened my chest, took my heart in his hands, and started to give it manual heart manipulation. In the midst of this, a hole was accidentally put into my heart as they were trying to get my heart beating again. The hole was repaired on the spot. They put me on a heart-lung machine to keep me alive. They were able to settle me. I survived the next day. That was a plus. They put me on a bypass machine so that my blood was circulated outside my body. He put a chemical pacemaker drip into my heart to keep it beating and oxygen directly into my lungs. I had high fever, so they had packed me in ice. Yes, each day a new day, a gift. I was still alive. But each day was a nightmare. I had many blood transfusions. I had many IV tubes going into my body. No one to this day could tell us what had happened, what had gone wrong. I was completely paralyzed, including my diaphragm, and I was dependent on a ventilator. On day 10, my heart started beating. They took me back in surgery and rebuilt me. I had 3 major strokes and 2 serious heart attacks they called infarcts during the 10 days. My blood had not been circulating. My legs became necrotic. If my legs were not amputated, I would die. It was life-threatening. Danny was my advocate and had to make the decision for me. I did not know what was going on. One amputation was done, the other one was amputated the following day. I had no idea what was happening. I woke up 3 months later. My surgeon looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Kayfetz. We had to amputate your legs in order to save your life." I was shocked. I found everything confusing. How could I look after my family with no legs? Panic. This was not easy. I remained on heavy medication. I couldn't speak because I had a tracheotomy. I couldn't hold a paper cup in my hand as I was so weak. My hands became black, demarked. I almost lost both hands. By some miracle, they survived, with the exception of the tip of my pointer finger. Ta-da. Waking up was frightening, scary. I panicked. Danny was the only one who could soothe me. It took hours. Danny had been with me every day, reading poetry, playing music, describing thousands of photographs. On the day I woke up, the surgeon told Danny they didn't expect me to live. Why, I was told no one in medical history has ever come back after 1 day, never mind 10. No one else has ever come back to life. My eldest daughter was the cement of the family, held everyone up, held everyone together, made sure I wasn't seen by anyone other than herself and my husband. She was a messenger, giving me reports on my condition. She too never left my side. My son remained silent. It was hard for him. He was 23 years old. He had trouble dealing with the entire mummy situation. I was his superhero. I took him fishing, canoeing in the Black River. I let him drive the boat by himself when he was 6 years old, 13 when he drove a car. This can't be happening to his incredible mother. The girls aged 10 and 9 were very young. My situation was too hard to deal with. Understand this daily burden. We hadn't told them anything yet. How would we tell them that their mummy has no legs? Danny consulted with the therapists, physiotherapists, and no one had an answer. I looked at my husband and said, "Babe, you and I will tell them together." They came in, we hugged, kissed, they colored on the floor, played cards. We created a relaxed atmosphere. Then I said to the girls, "Come sit next to me." I told them about my amputations. My 10-year-old was hysterical, crying, tears pouring down her cheeks, pulling her knees up to her chin, shaking. My littlest, the 9-year-old, got up, marched around the bed to me, put her little arm around me, and whispered, "Don't you worry about a thing, Mummy. I will look after you." And they still do, and they're now in their 30s and 40s and 50s. There and then, they all dedicated themselves to caring for their mother. They are my champions, my heroes. They've been fearful that I will die every day. I've been blessed to have this special time with my family. And by the way, I'm now a proud bubby of 5 grandchildren, Baruch Hashem. There are months of scar tissue to heal. I slowly graduated to wearing the prosthetics. I learned how to stand, to balance, and to take my first steps like a baby. My family was with me when I took my first steps. We were all in tears. Each child is filled with their own feelings and emotions. I saw their smiling faces and tears of joy as they watched me walk through the parallel bars. I felt like Humpty Dumpty. They put me back together again with prosthetics. All of this had so many tremendous challenges. I managed my challenge on a minute-to-minute basis, right up to today. It was suggested that I might need a heart transplant in 10-year post-surgery. It's now been 28 years, and I march forward. I don't even count the numbers anymore. I'm above the green grass, and that's what counts.
Thank you, Carol.
You're welcome, Zena.
That was very, very moving and an incredible story. An experience like the one you've just described can make a person either decide to reject life or embrace life, and you have obviously embraced life. You mentioned you have grandchildren, which is a blessing. Can you just tell us a little bit more about what your life is like today?
My life is wonderful. I have the best life anybody could possibly have. And I blame it all on my husband.
Okay.
He does everything.
Yeah, he's the guilty party that gave you an amazing life.
Yes, he did.
Okay.
So I'm blessed.
Okay. That's a really wonderful story, and I'm sure everybody who hears it can just take so much from it. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing it with us.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. I'm here now with Danny Kayfetz, husband of Carol Kayfetz, just to do some follow-up and ask Danny from his perspective to tell us his side of the story about his wife's experiences. Danny, can you share your side of what happened to Carol during the time she was discussing?
Well, there's my end of the story, which is a story of fear and uncertainty. You can imagine that in your life you've never really had anything like this to deal with, and then all of a sudden you're told, all right, you go to the hospital and they say to go home. There's nothing wrong with you, you got chest pain. But luckily it was a new cardiologist, fresh out of school, who just came from Montreal, and she wasn't going to let that happen. The theory at that time in the 90s was send women home to die, that's what I think, and men were kept in surgery, and surgery was done on people who were already really sick. And I learned that when the decision was made to actually do the surgery, and you would not believe how many people had to meet in order to approve her having the surgery. Charlie Pendleton came in and met with her, with his team, and he said, you are the first person I've actually met before doing surgery since I've been a surgeon. Everybody was brought in by ambulance or by air ambulance on the cusp of death. And he said, I can do this, right? And he came out and he said, slick, was what he said, slick. Take her back, take her to Miami for a weekend and come back here. I want to keep you in the hospital for 3 days and things are going to be fine. Mm-hmm. And then what happens is unthinkable. Like, she dies. She's dead. Her heart's not beating. And the surgeon comes out, and a different surgeon, because he left right after that surgery, and he said, I'm keeping her alive, and we just sort of sit back and wait to see what happens. I had no concept, except I knew we were in trouble, and nobody would talk to me truthfully about what was going on. Mm-hmm. Day 1 became day 2, 3, 4. At day 5, he came in and said to me, I don't know what's going on here, and I can't tell you anything about this. We're just waiting. In the meantime, I didn't know, as they told me the day she woke up, that no person in medical history has lived without their heart beating for more than the day that it happens. It's then a question of their body shutting down and how long it takes. And we get to day 10, her heart starts beating. So I know that's a good news. Imagine they then come back and say to me, okay, now here's the choice you have. We've done 3 CAT scans. It turns out she's got strokes in information processing areas in her brain, so we can't tell the effect of them, but she may not have a functioning brain. If we do not amputate her legs, she will die from that peacefully. And if we do amputate her legs, she won't die from that, but it doesn't mean she won't die. And remember, we don't know if she's got an operating mind, so maybe you want to let her die peacefully, or you amputate her legs and see what happens and see if she's got an operating mind. Well, Jesus, that's a hell of a decision to make. Mm-hmm. Maury Glassman, my mother's brother, was an orthopedic surgeon, and he explained to me that amputation is something that is done to allow somebody to have mobility. When he started doing amputations in World War II, they tried to keep things as long as they could. They didn't understand they were building a base to put structure on, and if they amputated her legs, they would be able to build something so she'd be able to walk. So that was something I dealt with, but the question is, would she live or not? And days became months, and one day an arm moved. She was completely paralyzed. One day an arm moved, knocked out all the lines. And one day she started breathing. They took the ventilator away. I said, where are you going, right? No, either you're breathing or you're not breathing. All right, so this seems good news. But we don't know until the day she opens her eyes. And one day, so I would get makeup, the expensive makeup at a drugstore. I knew the stuff she liked for her eyes and her face, and put it on her face. I dressed her in nightgowns as opposed to leaving the hospital clothes every day. I put classical music playing, which she turned out she actually could hear. And I read her books. I read the poetry, the high school books with all the English poetry in it that you could read forever, 500 pages. I went through that. I went through hundreds of pictures and described to her what was going on, thinking that if there was anything going on in her brain, she could hear all this. And one day, I walked in and she was sitting up. She was awake. And she couldn't talk because she had a tracheostomy, and she wrote the date down on a whiteboard. She somehow knew what the date was. And this was the beginning of our trip back, that we didn't know what we were heading for. And it wasn't until that time they told me that nobody had lived. So I never gave up hope. And I wonder if I would have had, but it didn't matter. The problem I had was I lied to the children. I didn't want them to be faced with the devastation of knowing whether mother was going to be alive or dead the next day. I told them she was sleeping. There was a major conference at the hospital involving psychologists from Sick Kids Hospital, psychologists and psychiatrists from TGH, to see how would they tell the children. This was a unique situation. There were no double amputees in Canada because we don't have landmines here. And nobody had to deal with a situation like this where some kind of an accident during a surgery caused somebody to lose their legs when it had nothing to do with what they were in there for. And they had all kinds of great ideas to try and make it easy for the kids. Carol said, I'll tell them. I don't want them to be afraid of me. I don't want them to come in with fear. Bring them to me. I'll cuddle them, hug, and I'll tell them. What a move that was. And she did it. She pulled it off. Lisi still hasn't forgiven us, but the fact is, Carol carried it out and was able to do it. And the one thing I say up until now, it's 30 years. She has never said that she's sorry for herself. She's never said, why this happened to me. She's never found fault with anybody. She said, I'm going to learn to walk, and I'm going to raise my family. And that was she determined to do, to create a normalcy out of this terrible situation. And she's done that.
And she's done that.
Day and night. Never crying, never waking up saying, like, why'd this happen to me? It's 30 years of her being positive and reaching out to other people who need help. And an interesting little story that is that she was driving until recently. She had to go on a driver trainer. She had to go like with people who were learning how to fly airplanes before they let her take a driver's test to give her back her license. And they gave that, and many times she's like, when we're on a highway, she'll drive. And so one day she goes down to the bank, and she doesn't know that no stopping means they tow away your car. So she comes out of the bank with the talk, and the policeman has just had her car towed away, and he looks at this disabled, and he says, oh my God, I just towed this car away. He says, why? He says, it says no stopping. So he drives her in a police car down to under the Gardner Expressway. And it turns out the lady who runs it is the wife of the owner of the company. And so Carol goes there, and she says to Carol, I've been doing this for 6 years. You are the first person to have ever come in to get a car with a handicap sticker on it that was actually handicapped.
Oh my gosh.
That's the story.
Okay, that was great. Danny, thank you. I will also add that I don't think you feel sorry for yourself either in your situation, and you are an amazingly devoted husband. And as Carol said, I don't think she could have done this without your love and devotion.
We take every day and make the best we can of it.
Yes.
And we've got children
Yes.
who help us along the way. So
Yes.
life is nice and the fact is we don't know if there's a tomorrow.
No.
So Carol says, let's live for today.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean be careless or negligent. It just means let's just take the day and do the best we can with it.
Absolutely, and I wish you both a very long life and more happy times with each other and with your family. Thank you so much.
But